Gentlemen from Georgia for yielding, for convening us here today on this incredibly important issue on the House floor, and of course for your extraordinary leadership on behalf of the songwriters in America. You know, over the years I've gotten to know some very good country lawyers. I've also gotten to know some very good country preachers. My good friend from Georgia is the best of both worlds, and so we appreciate the tremendous skill set that you've brought to bear here in the United States Congress. We're members, of course, of the class of 2012, and it's been wonderful to work closely with you in your capacity as the lead sponsor of this very important piece of legislation. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8 of the United States Constitution gives Congress, both the House and the Senate, the power to create a robust intellectual property system. In the words of our founders, in order to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. The founders of this great country understood that it was important to create a robust intellectual property system in order to allow creators and innovators to be able to benefit from the fruits of their labor. Songwriters, of course, are at the heart of the music ecosystem, a music ecosystem that produces a variety of different forms of music. We know that there's country and there's pop and there's rock and roll, there's blues, there's bluegrass, there's jazz, there's Motown, there's hip-hop and R&B, which we tend to be partial to in the 8th Congressional District. But what all of them have in common is that someone had to create this music. And at the heart of that creation, at the heart of the ecosystem, of course, is the songwriter. Now, if the songwriter were to disappear or to be diminished in number, then the whole system of music creation collapses. And in many ways, that's what the Songwriter Equity Act is all about. Because of the inherent fundamental unfairness in the current system by which songwriters are compensated. Congressman Collins and I have been able to work closely with a variety of different stakeholders from throughout the nation, and certainly Nashville and Atlanta and New York have wonderful songwriting communities. The chairman of ASCAP, Paul Williams, who's been a tremendous advocate, often has said before the Judiciary Committee and in other contexts that songwriters may be the most heavily regulated small business people in America. And unfortunately, that heavy regulation, as is often the case, is not benefiting them. In fact, in many ways, is suffocating the songwriting community. It's not working to their benefit. It's not consistent with the DNA of our Constitution as it relates to intellectual property, which is to enable creators to benefit from the fruits of their labor. And that's why the Songwriter Equity Act is such an important piece of legislation. In order to allow those songwriters who are spread out in all 435 congressional districts in every great state in the union to be able to participate fairly in the music ecosystem that is so central to the genres that we all know and love throughout our land. Music, of course, is universal in nature. It crosses all boundaries of race and religion, socioeconomics, region, cultural boundaries in this incredibly diverse nation of more than 320 million people. That's why it's been so wonderful to participate in this journey as it relates to trying to do the right thing for the songwriter in this country. And as has been pointed out by my colleague from Georgia and the other participants here, there are really two fundamental things that the Songwriter Equity Act attempts to correct. First, it's important to make sure that the rate courts, who often decide the compensation for songwriters in certain contexts, have an opportunity to consider all of the evidence so that they can arrive at an informed decision as to what makes the most sense. It's just illogical to believe that a rate court that is walled off from certain forms of evidence, such as the compensation received by recording artists, can arrive at a fair and equitable decision. And in fact, what we've seen is that over time, because this wall has existed, the compensation for recording artists has increased significantly. The compensation for songwriters has remained at an artificially low level. That's one of the things that we're trying to correct. Let all of the evidence be considered by the courts that are determining these rates. And lastly, Songwriter Equity Act is designed to bring some notion of market fairness to the compensation of songwriters who create the music that we love. And right now, we've got artificially imposed regulatory rates on these songwriters in a manner that's not fair, that's not just, not consistent with a market-based approach that has made the United States so prosperous for so many other folks. That's why songwriters rightfully can say, this over-regulation is not working for us. We just like to be able to get the fair market value of our creations. And that's what the Songwriter Equity Act is designed to do. And so I'm looking forward to working closely with my good friend from Georgia. He's been a tremendous leader in this regard, and I'm hopeful that we will be able to soon advance this legislation before the Judiciary Committee. It's got tremendous bipartisan support, Republicans and Democrats, progressives and conservatives, and advance this legislation out of Judiciary onto the House floor and eventually get it to a place where it can be signed into law from the President. Thank you for your extraordinary leadership.